Welcome to another edition of Geopolitics and Empire. As always, support the transmission. Best way to do that is by becoming a paid subscriber on the Substack. I provide a weekly commentary, which is now in video format, where I bring together all of the news. I do that once a week, and I also schedule sessions every week or two with supporters only, group calls where we shoot the breeze on global events. It's a sort of therapy, as I like to call it. And on rare occasion, I'll bring back past podcast guests to do a live Q&A. Do check out my affiliates, EasyDNS, Escape the Technocracy, Wise Wolf Gold, Above Phone, Societatis Civis. You can also purchase a consult if you want to chat with me. And please donate. That helps a lot. Buy me a coffee donor box, subscribe star, or just become a paid subscriber on the Substack. Leave a podcast review if you haven't already. And it's been a while, but returning to the podcast is John Klyczek of schoolworldorder.info. He's the author of School World Order, the Technocratic Globalization of Corporatized Education. I think we talked about that on the podcast previously. He also contributes to several publications, including New Politics, Op-Ed News, Activist Post, and Whitney Webb's Unlimited Hangout. Welcome back to Geopolitics and Empire, John.
Hey, thanks for having me here, boy. It's been a while.
It's been a while. We hung out some years back in Illinois. We did a Croatian-style barbecue. That was a lot of fun. Unfortunately, I haven't been traveling much to the United Soviet States of America these days. But just real quick, how were things on your end and with the work that you're doing?
Yeah, this year I'm busy so far. I kind of sensed the tides shifting last year, and so I was getting ready to write the series that I'm in the middle of as far as what Trump is going to be doing with education. Hopefully I'm going to get out. I'm trying to get as much in front of it as possible and see if maybe I could slow it down a little bit. We'll see. We'll see what we can do.
Yeah, and so you wrote a great in-depth piece for Unlimited Hangout titled Trumped 2025, school choice corporatization, social impact finance, and the dismantling of the Department of Education. And I'm just going to read a real quick an excerpt where you write, quote, "Far from abolishing government control of schools, the Project 2025 plan to disband the Education Department would only restructure the bureaucracies involved in administering federal education entitlements. In the meantime, Project 2025 school choice reforms, which include federal education savings accounts, will likely expand control over private schools, including religious schools and homeschooling, while also publicly subsidizing ed-tech corporations. At the same time, Project 2025's school choice tax credits are primed to expand the corporatization of education through public-private partnerships that leverage ed-tech to data mine how pay for success impacts scholarships, streamline student outcomes for the social credit economy of the fourth industrial revolution." And often in your writing, your stuff is dense, well-sourced. There are terms that are new, I think, for a lot of us, including myself. This impact investing stuff. Some of it still sounds a bit esoteric, but tell us what's going on here, John.
So you can think of it in two broader categories. So the first is the dismantling, or rather reorganization, of the Department of Education. And then the other one is the school choice track. And the school choice track is basically two broad reforms that are laid out in Project 2025. One is the education savings accounts, which is going to funnel public tax dollars into private schools. So for private tuition, either it could be a parochial school, religious school, could be a home school, could be for ed tech services, right, for products from ed tech corporations. And then the other arm of that is a bill that has been in the making for a while. It's called the Educating Children for Choice Act, the ECCA. And this one it's a similar scheme to funnel public tax dollars into private schools and private companies. But this is a tax credit scheme. So they'll give tax credits to companies or individuals that donate to what are called scholarship granting organizations. And then those scholarship granting organizations will then dole out monies for private tuition, private schools, et cetera. And a lot of these SGOs is the acronym for the scholarship granting organization. They utilize something called impact investing. And so impact investing, there's different vehicles for this. There's basically, ESG type of investments, social credit types of investments. So different types of impact investments include like social impact bonds or human capital performance bonds or pay for success contracts. Pay for success contracts are stipulated in the Every Student Succeeds Act, which is one of the main federal bills that oversees education in America. And the way that these work is the entity, the company, the SGO will put up money up front for a particular project trying to achieve certain outcomes. These outcomes could be socio-cultural outcomes like DEI, sort of woke type cultural outcomes, but they can also be socioeconomic outcomes, so workforce development outcomes, or they could also be on other social credit indexes like wellness outcomes or recidivism outcomes. And depending on how effectively the SGO fulfills those outcomes with its scholarships, it will receive that amount of money back. So if it meets the outcomes, it'll get the money back. If it exceeds them, it can make a profit. If it's a nonprofit, then obviously it just funnels it back into the scholarship scheme. But those are sort of the three things, two broader things, and then the school choice, we could break it down into those two other angles. That's sort of the menu of school reforms that Trump is pushing here. And all of this is laid out in Project 2025 as well.
Yeah, that's my next question. So for people who are living abroad or even in the U.S. who aren't as familiar, what is Project 2025?
So Project 2025, they title it "The Mandate for Leadership," is developed by the Heritage Foundation. On the advisory board, you also have the American Legislative Exchange Council. And what it is if you read through it, they have a chapter for basically every aspect of the executive branch. And what they all really have in common is essentially the best way to describe it is if you look at it and you think back to like Patriot Act days right after 9/11, it's basically a plan for the unitary executive that they wanted and weren't able to get through. When they did their Patriot Act, and then they had all these other things in the mix like LifeLog and Total Information Awareness, which became Facebook and Palantir, right? But I think it was John Yoo that sort of wrote the legal rationale for how you could make a unitary executive, and didn't get much traction then. But if you look at Project 2025, that's essentially what it is in the realm of education. Basically, it's laying out sort of everything, the menu of reforms I just detailed. The people that are behind it, it's a milieu of neoconservative and beltway libertarian think tanks that are connected to the Koch brothers. And so that's Trump had said leading up to it in the United, it was, I don't want to say, it was made public probably late 2023, certainly early 2024. And anytime you brought it up, you got called, well, that's a liberal talking point, to which I always like to say, well, that's a right-wing deflection point. Trump said repeatedly, as you see in the beginning of the article, I quote, that he says, I got nothing to do with it. I don't want to have anything to do with it. I haven't read it, et cetera, except that 20, I think close to 30 members of his cabinet or other high-level executive officials in his first administration were involved in the authorship of Project 2025. Several of his current cabinet members were also involved. So people I could name off the top of my head would be Ratcliffe, who's the head of the CIA, Tom Homan, who's the border czar, Russell Vogt, who's the head of OMB. Okay. And so, he could say that he didn't know anything about it. If he didn't, maybe he should have read it, because he's doing everything that they're saying and he's got the people on board. One more thing I would add to that, why I never bought that he didn't know anything about it, is that my mentor, Charlotte Thompson Iserbyt, for people that don't know, she wrote the foreword to my book, worked in the Ronald Reagan administration in the Department of Education. Excuse me. And blew the whistle on something called Project BEST. It's basic education skills through technology. It was basically a plan to create public-private partnerships between government schools, big tech corporations to implement computerized learning that would use operant conditioning to psychologically engineer students for workforce development. And what she told me was that on day one, whatever department you are involved in the executive branch, when you get there on day one, you get a heritage playbook. Basically, the Heritage Foundation, since its inception, is essentially the policy making arm of the Republican Party. So, that's what they did when she was there. I'm sure that's what they did when Trump was there. And the other reason why I'm pretty confident that that's what happened when he was there, and that's why I'm sure he's aware of it, is that one of the people that was on his transition team was Edwin Meese, who was also part of the Reagan administration when Charlotte was there. So it's not just the same institutions, it's the same people. So I'm sure he knows that that's how the game is played. So.
And speaking of deflection, which you just mentioned, get your thought on this idea where they say they want to eliminate the Department of Education. And I'm finding this across the board with Trump 2.0. A lot of stuff that sounds good and on paper is good, but they don't carry it out either the way that they say that we think they will, or it's it's a shell game. And just as an example, it's kind of like, I think recently when they said they wanted to reduce military spending by, I think, 8%, but then they're like, guys, yeah, we're going to redirect that 8%. We're not actually going to cut it. And you write in your article, quote, according to the Project 2025 playbook, the proposed Department of Education Reorganization Act would transfer the bulk of federal education entitlements to the Department of Health and Human Services, the Department of Labor, while transferring other entitlements to the Department of Justice, the Department of Commerce, the Department of State, and you go further into detail. So they're not really eliminating the Department of Education, are they?
No. Look, so first things first, there was rumors that he's going to sign an executive order to dismantle the department. No, that's not how it works. It's created by legislation, so you have to have a bill to repeal it. Okay. But even if you do that, what we have in this country are called entitlements, right? So in education, there's at least 5 bills that have entitlement spending. So you have these title funds in bills like the Elementary and Secondary Education Act, the Higher Education Act, the Individuals with Disabilities in Education Act, the Every Student Succeeds Act, and then something like the Workforce Investment and Opportunity Act, which is actually more of a Department of Labor program, but it enters into public-private partnerships with schools, in particular adult and technical education programs that create the career pathways, such as those that would be funneled into the Pay for Success contract. So within each of those bills, there are funds that are in entitlements that are stipulated to by law that so for the one that we'll talk about is Title I. This is monies that go to schools or school districts that are impoverished. Okay. And so if you live in one of those areas, based on the ESEA, you're going to get those title funds. So if you get rid of the Department of Education, by law, you're going to have to shuffle those entitlements to other departments. And that's exactly what they say they're going to do in Project 2025. And so the bill that they propose is called the Department of Ed Reorganization Act. It's not the Dismantling Act. It's not the Dissolving Act. It's not the Elimination Act. It's not the Eradication Act. I should note that. This article came out the morning that Linda McMahon did her confirmation hearings. And I didn't get to listen to it that morning, so I was too busy responding to all of the hate online in response to the article. Got called a libtard. I got called a Marxist. I got told to get the F out of the country. I had one person tag Elon Musk in a tweet and suggest that I work for you. I've been taking USAID money and that I need to have my bank accounts looked at. I was like, if you want to peek in my tiny bank account, be my guest. But I watched the hearings since, and lo and behold, as far as the reorganization goes, they asked her, are you going to get rid of the entitlement funds? She says no. She said it several times. They asked her, how about the Individuals with Disabilities in Education Act? If you get rid of the department, how are you going to oversee that? She goes, well, I don't know if it wouldn't be better served at HHS, which is what Project 2025 says. They asked her about Title IX. How are you going to enforce Title IX? That's for people that know, Title IX is the provision that regulates gender discrimination. Okay, so at one point, Title IX was being used to put men in women's sports. Now it's being used to remove men from women's sports. So, and by the way, the only way that Trump can do that is if they keep the entitlement, right? He can't, his executive orders demanding that men not be in women's sports, that's based on Title IX, right? So he has to keep Title IX for the enforcement there. But they asked her, like, how are you going to oversee that? How are you going to enforce it? Well, I don't know if it'd be better served at the Department of Justice. So everything that she said is 100% in line with what's laid out in Project 2025. And she also suggests that, well, it might work better if it went back to the way it used to be, which was when it was the Department of Health, Education, and Welfare. So it's basically sort of just it's sort of rolling things back and shuffling the chalkboards on the Titanic, so to speak.
Yeah, and I guess to go further, school choice, right? So people might still be thinking, well, maybe it's not so bad. I had bookmark Alex Newman, friend of the podcast. He's been on the podcast. I've been on his show on multiple occasions. And I think he gave an interview recently. I haven't been able to watch it. It's been on my bookmark list where Alex Newman talks about, could school choice end school choice? Is school choice what its proponents claim it to be? If adopted, would it provide more or less freedom for the U.S.? And I think you write, quote, school choice is nothing more than a euphemism for an array of public-private partnerships that corporatize government education by funneling tax subsidies into private schools, charter school companies, and ed tech businesses, rather than foster curricular freedom independent of federal control. Project 2025's menu of school choices is primed to restrict options to government-regulated private schools, charter edu companies, and ed tech corporations, or corporate-managed PFS scholarships, which data mine students' learning analytics for social credit commodification of the digital economy of the fourth industrial revolution. So if you could further expand a bit on school choice. And, for example, if someone is homeschooling in the US, are they left to their own devices? Or is what you just described in your article, is that going to be like this hand that's going to be reaching into the homes of parents who are homeschooling?
So it will be the government strings attached to the homes, the government hand sort of poking around in the home. The way that'll happen will be through what they call the education savings account, the Title I education savings account. So school choices, you just sort of laid out, right? There's the first step in the door was the charter schools. These are private companies that operate as schools and take in public tax dollars, and they're subsidized as such. That's pretty much ubiquitous. I don't think there's a state in the country that doesn't have a charter school. Probably almost every county has a charter school. Okay. So when they're talking about school choice this time around, we're talking about essentially new funding vehicles. So the education savings accounts, the vouchers, and then the tax credits. They're all pretty much the same. But the education savings accounts, what they're proposing is to take some of those Title I funds that I mentioned, so the ones for impoverished students, and you put those in education savings accounts that parents can use for, quote, curricular materials, quote, education therapies, quote, personal tutors. Okay. Now, if you look at some of the state laws that the ESA proposal is based on, one of them that I quote from in the article is called the Alabama Choose Act. And in there, it says that if you take these dollars, you must therefore comply with all of state regulations, including health code regulations. Okay. So in other words, you want that money for your homeschool. Maybe if you're one of the people that moved to homeschooling because you didn't like what was going on with lockdowns and the mandates and the jabs and all that type of stuff, it might be that, right, you can't even use the money to teach your child at home unless you get that. And I know that people might say, oh, he recently passed an executive order banning COVID-19 mandates. That's interesting because, and I'm not against that, but if you read it, it's very narrowly defined. It's the COVID-19 vaccine mandate. It's not all coronavirus vaccine mandates. It's not all mRNA vaccine. It's not all vaccine mandates, right? So in other words, it's almost a moot point. It's banning a mandate that none of the schools where I'm at still mandate it. There might be some, but I'd be loth to find one. So that's one of the first that the government will thereby be able to regulate the private school, the home school, the religious school once they receive those ESAs. And if you think that's speculative, again, take a look at the state laws that have implemented these. If you can find one that doesn't have some type of government regulatory strings attached, please send it to my way, because I'm not able to find one. But the key here is that at one point during the confirmation hearing, Senator Blunt Rochester asked the best question of the whole hearing. She asked Linda McMahon, who is the nominee to be the Secretary of Education, to run the Department of Ed, or to be in charge of it while they dismantle it. Blunt Rochester asks her, well, if private schools take ESAs, will they be required to enroll students with disabilities? What she's asking is, if a private school takes the ESA, is the government going to regulate it? And McMahon, she dodged it, danced around it, kind of was going to try to filibuster it. And Blunt Rochester says, hey, it's a yes or no answer. Can you give me a yes or no? Well, I don't think it's a yes or no answer. And she said, well, I got other questions to ask. You can give me, you can write in, your explicated response. We're going to move on to the next question. I wish she would have stuck on that, because that was, that would have been the worst. That would have put her in the hard spot, most of all. So the state laws that do it, right, they already have government regulations. She clearly didn't. The answer wasn't no, right? The answer wasn't no government strings attached. So it'll be a lawsuit if there's not. Okay. But the other part of this is that if we look at where it says, quote, curricular materials, ESAs for curricular materials, it could be textbooks, right? Or could be, right, adaptive learning courseware, right? It's basically the digital Skinner box that data mines the students' psychometrics and puts them into their career pathways based on, how smart the algorithm determines. Education therapies could be maybe a counselor or something like that, maybe a speech therapist, or maybe it's a social emotional learning biofeedback wearable. Maybe it's a heart math EKG heart monitor that they use for managing test anxiety. They have these at the wellness center at one of my schools, by the way. Or maybe it's an EEG monitor, like, monitors the brain waves, like the company NeuroCore that no longer exists, that Betsy DeVos, she was on the board of directors, also an investor. This one was using the EEG monitors to help students manage their ADHD. You have, could be a robot, a social emotional learning robot, like the Moxie robot, that's supposed to help students, especially autistic students, learn how to parse emotions, that they can then transfer those skills to like social interaction with humans. And then, Moxie can double as quote unquote the personal tutor, but the personal tutor could also be maybe a human, but maybe GPT AI. Maybe it's the Open AI tutor, or maybe it's the Khan Academy Conmigo tutor. We should note that Khan Academy, funded by Elon Musk. I noted NeuroCore, funded by Betsy DeVos. Some of the adaptive learning courseware, Clever and Newton, funded by Peter Thiel. And one of the original the very first online virtual charter school, which was one of the, basically these were the first digital platforms where you could start to implement the different applications that could data mine the students. This was set up by Secretary of Education, former Secretary of Ed, Bill Bennett, as the founding chair, but the seed money for K-12 Inc. was bankrolled by Larry Ellison, right? So you've got three of the oligarchs behind Trump invested in this ed tech sort of school choice virtual online ecosystem.
I want to get to Ellison and some of the ed tech stuff, but just a further question on homeschooling, as an example. And I get what you're saying with the charter schools, the private schools, as you said, in the US, they all, who doesn't want to take this money? But using homeschooling as an example, which seems to be one of the last bastions of freedom. In some countries, it's outlawed. Germany, I believe France. I spoke to someone recently who says in France, homeschooling is outlawed. In my home of Croatia, it's not legal. Here, where I am in Mexico, there are other countries where you're completely left to your own devices, like in Mexico. When it comes to homeschooling, if I understand that correctly, I think during the primary or secondary schooling, you can get take your kid, you get an annual government certification or recognition that your kid did the work, or they pass a test and they get second, third, fourth grade recognition. But I think effectively you don't even need to do that. By the time when they get to high school age, they can just take the test, and if they pass, they get the high school diploma, and that's that. So I guess two questions here. Number one, if you're homeschooling in the US, for example, but you don't want any money, you don't care, you're just homeschooling your kid, you can sort of stay away from that, this stuff that you're talking about, any influence. And I guess the second question, do you think at some point, using Mexico as an example, that the Mexican government would be pressed by the international public-private partnership forces to begin to introduce stricter rules even for homeschoolers?
Yeah, so I mean, your first question is 100%. I mean, so some of the people say, like, I say, oh, well, this is just giving people choices to go to homeschool or private. I say, you already have those choices. I mean, I understand that money is a part of the choice, and maybe you might not have the money, but homeschooling, right, certainly doesn't cost as much as private school tuition. If you can put your heads together with a handful of other parents in the neighborhood and the community, sort of team up, pool resources, and resources doesn't even have to be money. It can just be your heads, right? I mean, there's a lot of free online open source resources for literacy, numeracy, especially, basic K through 12 stuff. So, it might seem daunting, but I promise you can do it. I know you can do it a lot better than you might think otherwise. As far as sort of pulling in how this would affect the international education system, part of the pay for success contracts, the career pathways, and this goes back even, prior to the 21st century, a lot of all the reforms were always emphasizing 21st century skills for the global economy, right? So if you want to have people accredited for the fourth industrial revolution, right, the sort of the social credit economy, a truly global economy, I have to surmise that it's only a matter of time until if they don't pool in some of these other education, I guess, systems or lack thereof in other countries, they won't have they won't be allowed into the economy. So they'll, over time, I think that is the game plan.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I think it's not solely just whether they go to a public school or a private school, all these little certificates and extracurricular projects and programs where you get these little like social credit badges, kind of like in the video game. And, I've seen that sort of stuff go on the EdTech companies front. I was recently looking at potential job opportunities. I live by faith, month by month. Honestly, I check what I make from the podcast. Is it enough? So far, so good. But I always have to have a plan B and plan C. And I'm looking at if it doesn't make the cut, where can I work? And so I was looking at job opportunities in the U.S. in education, and it was interesting to see that there are a lot of jobs now for educators or teachers where you can effectively in my mind, decent salary, 50 grand, whatever a year, 60 grand, something like that, middle class, and you can effectively work from home via these private online sort of schools that you're talking about. A lot of them are private. And I've seen, the only unfortunate part was it says you have to reside in the US. So I potentially have to move back to the US to a different state, but you can work from home as a teacher now and making a decent salary. And it says they can be mixed. So for the students, if you're a parent as well, you can choose to have 100% online schooling, or it could be mixed where it's part online, part in person, and they have, I guess, these like facilities around the US. So this is like a completely new model that I'm seeing. And also the systems seem kind of cool. I'm not going to lie. I haven't seen them up close, but they do seem kind of cool. And me as if I were a student, I think, oh, this is kind of cool. I could learn from home, and the software is pretty good and all that. But I don't know if you've ever played the video game Fallout 3, where you grow, you're in, there's the apocalypse, and you wake up as a kid in the vault, underground bunker vault, because there was a nuclear war, and you're raised in the vault until you get to adulthood, and then you leave the vault. But because of the dire situation, when you get to like high school age, you take a test, and then they tell you what you're going to be, and then they track your education. And it's kind of like, Soviet technocracy. And so just your further thought then on how the environment is shifting, both for teachers, where we can now work I can go back to Illinois, work in a public school. I wouldn't really want to do that. I could work for a private school. Now I can work as a teacher completely online from home. And the kids now have these choices that didn't exist just a few years ago. But, what's the caveat here?
Yeah, well, so I think kind of what it sounds like what you're describing is the move towards, I think end game is this. It's community charter schools attached to online homeschool. What does that mean? So the community schooling model in the United States is sort of the you could call it the left-wing counterpart to the right-wing school choice movement. Community schools, they could be public schools, but what makes them, as according to the ESSA, what makes it a full-service community school is it has to have what they call wraparound or pipeline services. And these are public-private partnerships with either healthcare, could be internship like workforce development or workforce training with in-demand industries in the local area, could be criminal justice or intervention programs for students that they deem to be at risk. It could be other mental health or wellness partnerships. It could be adult ed stuff or just like old elderly people that want to, maybe learn how to use a computer or, just do some extracurricular culinary. And so it sort of laid out the basket of the school choice partnerships, right? They're both public-private partnerships. But what they can have is a community charter school. So what is basically, it's a private company, operates as a school. So it has a corporate board, doesn't have an elected board. Okay. And then that private company that's receiving public tax dollars enters into other public-private partnerships with other private entities, and those are going to facilitate the wraparound services for the wellness checks and the career pathways training. Maybe you go there for a lab if you need to do like a science lab or PE or something like that. But most of the actual, we'll just call it the actual lesson plans for your basic coursework, anything that can be transmitted through a device at home will be done so, if for no other reason than the sake of efficiency, right? And one of the big pushes for the online stuff was like, oh, we could save money on all the brick and mortar expenses. And so all of this is essentially, I think that is the model. We're just sort of, from administration to administration, the left will sort of build on the community schooling, the right will build on the school choice. But in some ways, both kind of build on it together. Certainly the school choice, because, the charter schooling movement, charter school, the concept was created by a left-winger, a Democrat by the name of Albert Shanker, who was the head of the second largest teachers union in the United States, known as the American Federation of Teachers. The first charter school bill was put in by Bill Clinton in the 90s. The No Child Left Behind Act, which was under Bush, basically made funding, stipulated it based on outcomes. So what that did was, since the charter schools, they basically were a lottery, or, it wasn't open enrollment, right? So they selected people, and basically, they took the best and better students, which meant that they sort of brain drained the public schools, which meant that, right, the funding for those public schools would get shut down, and pushes more students into the charter school movement. Obama comes in, he puts in Arne Duncan. Arne Duncan basically privatized almost the entire education system in Chicago, as the Chicago Public Schools CEO. He becomes a Secretary of Ed, and charter schooling gets a big push under him. Betsy DeVos comes in, all about charter schools again. It's really only under Biden that kind of the school choice thing kind of went to the background. They really pushed on community schooling. Now we're going to come back for another round of school choice. But I think the end game is sort of the basket that I just described. And I think you're sort of illustrating how we're moving in that direction. One of the other terms they use for it is hybrid learning. I had anticipated that after lockdowns, this is the direction we would go in. I thought it'd be a little bit quicker. I will tell you that, I asked one of the secretaries at one of the schools right here, I said, how has this affected enrollment in terms of in person? And at the time, it's been a couple of years, she said about half of the students that went through, had to go through lockdown, they just stay online, never came back. Okay. In the meantime, I thought they were going to offer more hybrid courses where, like you said, maybe you go to the school once a week and then you do the rest online. But what they have done is, no matter what, didn't used to be this way. If you're teaching an in-person class, you still have to have everything online. Now, you don't necessarily have to facilitate the lessons through it, but it all has to be there on day one. Because if there's another emergency, another lockdown, or a snow day, or it's whatever, they close. It doesn't even have to be snowing. If it's too cold, they'll close the school. And you get an email or a text message or both that says, "Hey, get ready to teach everything online tomorrow." So to me, that's all a version of this hybrid system where they're going to sort of more increasingly make more of the digital stuff at home, and anything that needs to be hands-on will be at one of these wraparound services.
And you mentioned Corona, the beer, right? No, the other Corona. And I can't stress this enough. I get guests that want to come on that write books that talk about, oh, it was this accidental leak, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, given what you just said and all this stuff that we're seeing, I keep saying, in March of 2020, I called it. I said the goal, it's clear that it was planned for years, this event. And the main goal was the digitalization in many facets of our lives, as you mentioned, for education, for financial services, currency, payments, digital passports, digital IDs. And so I cannot entertain any longer anyone who runs this line. I mean, I'm of the opinion now people who are doing that are part of the system. I mean, how can you not see, I said in March of 2020 that the goal of the 2020 event was algocracy, to bring in a global rule by algorithm, rule by AI, digitalization of everything. And you're explaining it from the education vantage point. And, in the old days, if you're doing homeschooling, it'd be the analog world. So they wouldn't have as much data, right, on the child. And now what you're explaining, if you're doing it, you're going to be forced to, it's going to be digital, and they're going to have all this data, whether it's, you're schooling publicly or privately. And you mentioned in your article, Larry Ellison, you write, quote, "It's worth noting here that K-12 Inc. was also bankrolled by billionaire technocrat Larry Ellison, whom Trump recently tapped to deploy Oracle, a CIA-linked artificial intelligence corporation that collaborates with the World Economic Forum for the Stargate AI infrastructure project. It is also worth noting that the Trump's shadow president, Peter Thiel, was a private consultant to Secretary DeVos and a speechwriter for Secretary Bennett." And, Ellison was recently all over the place at World Economic Forum speaking, if I'm not mistaken, at World Governments Summit, possibly as well. And he talked about creating Gattaca, the movie, I think 1997 movie with Ethan Hawke and who was it, Uma Thurman, or if I'm not mistaken, or I get these actresses confused, but it was a good movie. And I love the soundtrack. They had a great song by Chris Cornell called "Sun Shower." It was a great soundtrack. But Ellison came out and said, we want to create a single DNA genetic database, one unify everyone's sort of like DNA, and that we can data mine that to kingdom come. And talked about, we're going to have biometric logins, no more passwords. So it's just going to be you log in with your face or your fingerprint or whatever. And it's Minority Report. And I view that DNA thing, it's that one of the last building blocks of the social credit system. So you've got biometrics, you got AI, you got surveillance, but you got to have the DNA aspect, because if you think of the Minority Report world, if you're a dissident, if they want to catch you or something, they have the DNA, and I'm sure they want to do things beyond as well. And even in China, I've read articles from Chinese sources that say that they faked. This was even before Corona. That there were health events, health scares that the government concocted just so that they could get citizens to give their blood. Like, we had with the PCR testing. And so just your further thoughts on some of these things, Larry Ellison, and even beyond education, some of the stuff that they're talking about, like biometric logins, DNA databases, and just beyond, like this fourth industrial revolution education, as you talk about it, the social credit economy, what that looks like, and just your thoughts on beyond education, just in the U.S., but even globally. I think this is what they're trying to do in every nation. No?
Yeah. So you noted that. I mean, look, we could talk about Event 201, right? You're talking about like the argument about how organic was the supposed pandemic, right? And if you recall, I don't know how in Illinois, I don't know if you were out here at the time, but in the years leading up, I remember driving around and everybody's going like, we'd see these giant buildings getting put on. What is that? Oh, they're Amazon warehouses. Right. I mean, so we're going to need these to, ship everything out because everything is going to be done. Right. We're going to have to deliver everything to your house. Amazon's going to be one of the only essential workers. So that's kind of coincidental that got, put in place right before. Another way to think about it is, people would, and I've had students write about it, when they're talking, I haven't read a lot of stuff on technology and stuff. And so, a lot of them are very optimistic. And so they'll be like, it was great that we had online learning and all this online stuff during, lockdowns during COVID because, enabled us to be able to still, survive. And it's like, now just turn that around. Think about it the other way. And the other way is maybe the reason we locked down is because we finally had the infrastructure in place to, get the ball rolling for all the data mining, surveillance, capitalism, etc. Right. And if you look at, I mean, the years leading up to it, the Amazon warehouses, I mean, you have to wonder, right? I mean, the timing, it's almost too perfect. Right. For it to be, we never did this before, but now that we got the ability to have this technocracy, we're doing it now. Right. So if you go back and you look at, if you go to my website and you go to the interviews menu at the top and you click on 2020 or 2021, either one, probably you could, swing a cat and hit an interview with a click in which I have said multiple times that lockdowns and the mandates for the mRNA and the viral vector vaccines were foot in the door for precision medicine industry. Okay. What's precision medicine? If your audience doesn't know, it's basically, we had a precision medicine initiative that was started by Obama. Basically, it's a push to what they call personalize all of your learning. All of your medicine. We're going to get to precision education in a second. We're to all of your therapies, therapeutics, medicines, drugs, etc., based on your unique genetic signature, based on your DNA. And so when Trump picks Ellison for the Stargate project, what are they talking about? Are they talking about a cancer moonshot that's going to create cancer vaccines based on what? Based on your personalized genetic signature. We're going to make the mRNA specifically tailored for your genome. That's precision medicine. So I guess I was pretty much on point with that. Okay. In education, there is a movement called precision education. Now, I wrote my book. It was published. It came out finally in October 2019. So this is just a few months before lockdowns, right? So I was very happy to have this tool in the chest when things went down, because it was like I had this thing that I could at least create some kind of pushback with rhetorically and in the civil sphere. But if you look in the book, pretty much everything that I've laid out, and it's sort of a future forecasting analysis, because I'm looking at things that aren't yet in play, but are being researched and developed, etc. Pretty much everything in there, except for the commercialization of brain-computer interfaces. But Neuralink is right there on the cusp, and like nanotech, those and like uploading consciousness, you're getting way down a transhumanist rabbit hole there. But all the other stuff, the wearables, the adaptive learning courseware, the large language models, the generative AI, all that stuff is pretty much, it's not ubiquitous, but it's very common. But one of the things that is still yet to really take off is what they call the precision education. Precision education is going to, all the data mining, the career pathways, the personalized modules, all these algorithms that are going to use to funnel you into your social credit niche. All of this data they want to base it primarily on your DNA, right? And it could be that, they could associate particular gene sequences with particular learning disabilities. But one of the main things they want to do is tie it to IQ. So this, if you read something like the bell curve, Charles Murray, The whole idea, it's basically a neo-eugenicist treatise on IQ metrics. A lot of the data in there, actually, one of the guys that's cited in there is Robert Plowman, and he's one of the figureheads behind the push for precision education. He wants to have what he calls a learning chip. It's not a brain computer interface or a neural implant. It's essentially some sort of like a blockchain ledger. He wouldn't use the term blockchain, but it's some kind of a digital ledger that has a record of your learning propensities based on your gene sequences. So, as we move into the Stargate world, and we move towards personalizing medicine, we might also see a push towards maybe therapies or other types of personalized learning modules based on DNA signatures.
If I could just get you to extrapolate a bit further, speculate, because when you talk about this personalized medicine and DNA stuff, and I'm sitting here thinking like, I don't really need that. Like I just live, I eat clean, no stress. I need to exercise more, all that sort of stuff. I'm not even taking supplements anymore, and I'm like perfectly fine. It's like I don't need personalized medicine or mRNA injections and whatnot. And even on paper, what they say, like for me, it just doesn't seem to make sense. The stated agenda, do you think it's for money purposes? It's like Big Pharma 2.0. That's probably one reason. Or they want to inject us with stuff, for sinister purposes, perhaps, depopulation, or is it also, I've had guests on talk about how they're trying to achieve immortality, and so they need data that they experiment with on us, then they plug it into their AI, and so that they can sort of maybe generate solutions. I mean, I don't think we'll ever be able to defeat death. I mean, it's already been defeated through Jesus Christ, right? So I don't think there's any scientific way we'll be able to plow through that ceiling of 120 or so years. Do you think there's any further ulterior motives, and I guess control as well, if this DNA gene editing stuff is part of the social credit system? Do you see any other sort of reasons for why they're so obsessed with that?
I would say primarily the most immediate would be just to streamline the social credit economy, to have precise measurements that make their predictive analytics fit into their whatever outcomes they want in their central planning mechanisms. But I think the other element is, you sort of alluded to, the immortality freaks. If AI can teach a student better than a human, then you don't need human teachers. But why do you need the student? Because anything you teach the student, right, the AI can do. What I'm getting at here is that much of the utility of sort of the human dreg, right, the sort of the workforce slave, there's not much value in that if you can automate a lot of that. So what value can you extract from a human being at this point? Well, for someone like Larry Ellison, who's 80 plus years old and looks like he's not a whole lot older than me with all his plastic surgery and whatnot. By the way, if you don't know, yes, the man is very much invested in life extension technologies. I don't know if it's Calico, but I was reading a piece. I might be mixing it up, but they were talking about him along with Sergey Brin and Peter Thiel and these people, right? They're very much interested in this. So it might be the case that, right, they just want to experiment on us, data mine us, inside and out, to figure out, what sorts of gene therapies or life extension therapies they can use for themselves. I might also note that I think another element of this is going to be, Ellison's like talking about this world where you have AI nodes data mining everything, for predictive analytics, basically pre-crime and all this type of stuff. I ran out. Oh, that's what it is. Yeah, the Dishman article. So the Precision Medicine Initiative, one of the guys that was involved in it early on, he had a project called All of Us. Okay, and so what it was this is a guy that did a lot of research on like smart homes for people with Alzheimer's. Right, so it had like all this AI stuff set up, remind them to take their medications and things like that. And he had a project called All of Us, where he wanted to put however many million people into this program, and they were going to basically scan the DNA, right, look at their genetic signatures, but then they were also going to have them put wearables on and stuff, and have it basically be in a smart home ecosystem with wearables. And they're going to data mine, basically think of Fitbits and things, all of their biometrics, psychometric, health metrics, right, pedometers, exercise, right, blood pressure, heart rate, all this type of stuff, and eating habits, all this type of stuff, and correlate, basically extrapolate correlations between, right, the environmental behaviors and any epigenetic changes, right, anything that would activate maybe the cancer genes or something like that. So I also speculate that part of why they want all of the ubiquitous screen technologies, wearables, etc., is sort of that end of the precision medicine sort of data mining project as well.
You mentioned smart homes. An ad that X served me the other day, it was interesting. It was from something called Tunnel to Towers Foundation, and how they're built. They have a smart home program for disabled veterans, and you go to their website and it shows video of these smart homes. Like, you name it. There's cameras. Imagine living in, it's like a Truman Show. This is what they're selling. Like, so your whole home, like every room is wired up with cameras. So I couldn't live like that. They've got the automatic toilets. I guess you just speak to the toilet and the lid goes up and all that sort of stuff. And you get the drift. And so it's interesting how, of course we want to help disabled veterans, but it's just kind of interesting again how these things are all coming together in this way. I did, and I never thought what you just mentioned. If we just did that thought experiment, if they're replacing adults, teachers, they're making them obsolete, what's the point of the students? They're also obsolete as well. Like, it's just kind of, at some point it's going to get to that stage. Well, why are we even training students? We don't need them. AI, software, robots will do everything. And you recently shared an article from Forbes, which was from last year, but it says, could Elon Musk's AI robots save a troubled education system? Classrooms where routine tasks are handled by a humanoid robot could soon be a reality, with 44% of K through 12 teachers in the US feeling burned out often or always. Advanced AI robots could offer much needed support. And then, of course, not just humanoid robots, but software. And, I do have to admit, is there any silver lining here? We see people in alternative media also selling courses. And, if we are autodidacts, we can teach ourselves. I've taken some Coursera courses that were very good, on game theory and on Thomas Jefferson. So, like, there is tech that we can use for good, but just, thoughts on that and thoughts on this stuff that we're seeing, like humanoid robots.
Yeah, obviously, technology has been very, very much helpful to me, not just writing the book. There's 270 something links in this most recent article. And most of which, I can go to the Department of Education. I can go to, congress.gov, right? I can go and I don't have to go to a library. I don't have to use an index, right? I can keyword search, right? So my ability to do research and to get it out there, right? Without internet, social media, you and I probably would have never, met, right? If it was 20, 30 years ago, so definitely, to me, the crux of the matter is really, I'm not an engineer, but I'm pretty sure you could design all this stuff minus the data mining. I'm pretty sure you could have, right, video transmissions and social media stuff. Now, if you want things to feed you personalized, etc., then I guess there has to be some data involved. But I think we're all capable of curating our own favorites and click a like and a notification button. I'll pick the ones that I want to be notified on. You don't have to try to look at behind my brain and figure it out. But as far as like AI in education, that's another one where, I've thought a lot, certainly about like large language models, right? Now, if you're using a large language model, right, which is right, a linguistic tool to help you maybe with math, which is right, a quantitative skill, right? I could see it, and I'm not a math person, so maybe a mathematician would disagree that they might find this problematic as well. But I could see how the linguistic interventions to help you with your quantitative calculations could be an aid. But if you're using a large language model AI to help you with communication, whether it be speaking or writing, if you're using something like a Grammarly or some other GPT to basically fix your grammar for you, or tell you if your sentences lack clarity, or tell you if the supporting details connect to the topic sentence, or whether the summary statement warrants the topic sentence, et cetera, basically what you're doing is you're letting that AI fill in the metacognitive part of the brain that actually is the muscle that you work to get better at processing information, both in terms of ingesting it and then transmitting it, right? So in other words, right, the ability to be an effective communicator, whether speaking or written, is to introspectively look within, monitor your monologue, right? Look for contradictions, make sure the categories in the mind, right, comport with the categories externally in reality. You take those ideas, you put them on paper, write them down, read it, ask yourself questions about whether the thing on the paper, right, says the thing that was in your head, and whether or not that actually does comport to the thing in reality, right? It's a recursive process of continually, right, thinking about thinking, asking yourself questions about the words in your head and the words on the paper. If you're using AI to help you, like, sort of cut to the chase, it's filling in that spot. So that, for lack of a better term, cognitive muscle is going to get atrophied. And this is something that, Kissinger and Eric Schmidt talk about in their AI book. I think the term is something like, it's either AI, I don't know if it's decline or atrophy, whatever the phrase is, but it's something to the effect of, essentially what I'm explaining is that the more we rely on the large language models, the less we will be able to understand and process languages. I'm also concerned that, one of the things, I talked about the pay for success, impact investments, and most of the stuff I write always focuses on what's going to happen to the students. I am concerned about my own, how I'm going to survive and stuff, but I don't like to muddy my research with any kind of bias where it looks like I'm, if I were to write about the things they want to do to teachers so much. But I will tell you that one of the things I've come across is what they call pay for performance. This is largely geared for teachers. Right. So basically, I don't know, they have different, stipulations. You might start with a baseline and then you can earn more if you have better outcomes. Some might just be, hey, your students aren't learning enough. You're not getting paid your full salary. If they were to install put in such a policy while they're funneling ESAs and tax credits into AI, and they're doing pay for success data mining, and they go and pay for performance data mining, and they look at the two and they go, hey, the AI did it at least, maybe just as good or close to as good and for half the costs. And so, data says you go bye-bye, GPT comes in. I wouldn't put it past them to set up that scenario in a way that would mimic, the scenario that I described when they brought in charter schools, then did No Child Left Behind, to make it say like, oh, look, these public schools are no good. We need to push everything over here. So that was my thought.
I definitely see, come on, that's what they're going to do. We know that's what they're going to do. And, I'm in the same boat. I'm an educator, teacher for the moment, not, but yeah. And it's speeding up. And the previous point that you made, I think that is very important, because it's speeding up, making ourselves obsolete. I mean, you look at Google Maps, for example. When I was a kid, I would drive to different states. I drove from Illinois to Michigan to Canada to see concerts, primarily to go to different shows, and there was none of that. I think maybe at some point I did end up printing out the Google Map, but it was still printed, and I would have to figure out,
I remember
the routes. Yeah. This was before the smartphones, or I can't recall. Maybe I had maps at some point, and so we're now not even developing that muscle. Like, people can't get around their own city where they're from anymore without Google Maps, where before you'd have to know at least some of the core basic streets and phone numbers no one remembers anymore. And even Grammarly, I actually think it's a good point. We shouldn't be using that stuff. We should just, sometimes when I write on Substack, they don't have a spell check. And at first, now I think that's actually a good thing after what you just explained, because I'm just writing and there's no spell check, and I have to work on my muscle to make sure I edit and all that. So really good point. I want to ask you, how do you see the new world order project, as I call it, the MAGA Musk Trump 2.0? You've gotten heat, as you said. I have as well. I don't know how people don't see it, but I basically say that, Trump and company are installing the new world order. They've tricked us to think that it's anti-system, that they're dissidents, but no, it's a trick. Your thoughts there?
Well, here's one interesting, it's kind of a tangential detail, but I think it provides a nice window into what we're looking at here. Once upon a time, and you probably remember this time, alt media, there was a lot of talk about the false left-right paradigm and the two-party duopoly and the uniparty. You still hear people say uniparty now, but for some reason, people actually mean Democrat or left, or right. Even when they say deep state, right? It somehow over the last 8 or more years, maybe I guess 12, because I guess he had I guess more 8, but decade or so. Somehow, through alt media, we've somehow turned the Overton window where it's like this partisan thing. But as I was doing research on sort of the think tanks behind Project 2025, and I guess I could just name a few of them. So you got the America First Policy Institute, right? These are all part of something called the State Policy Network. Okay, it's a consortium of again neoconservative Beltway libertarian think tanks, largely funded by dark money from Koch brothers. Okay, so America First Policy Institute, Linda McMahon was the chair of the board of that. You have American Enterprise Institute. That's one of the authors of the Project 2025 education section is Max Eden. Okay, he's an AEI member. American Legislative Exchange Council is on the advisory board of Project 2025. Betsy DeVos has also been very active with ALEC. Cato Institute. Cato Institute was basically where the Koch brothers kind of got their start. This is where, Cato was also part, Murray Rothbard was also part of it. And sort of the Koch brothers broke with, Rothbard broke with the Koch brothers because the Koch brothers, they basically, their idea was, this is why they're called Beltway libertarian, Beltway referring to sort of the DC Beltway. And they wanted to use government to either legislate things that were favorable to libertarians or to set up public-private partnerships, which for people like Rothbard, that school of libertarianism, they didn't want anything to do with that. I mean, this is just, state capitalism, right? Excuse me. Well, the Austrian School of Economics, that was the reason it got the promotion it did here in these, sort of pseudo-libertarian circles, was with the help of somebody like David Rockefeller. He was also a student of the London School of Economics, hotbed for Fabian socialism, right? What I'm getting at here is that essentially what we're seeing is the merger of both of those schools of economics, right? The basically the elements that the oligarchs could use for a more streamlined, centralized system. So it's basically the perfect combination of sort of the communist socialist welfare state with the techno-fascist company town, right? Merged into sort of this communitarian technocracy. But one of the things I stumbled onto while I was, and this is more further to illustrate, right, this fake left-right thing. Right now, I guess we're going to do the fake libertarian thing until people get tired of that, and then maybe we'll switch gears if the world still exists by the end of it. But as I'm doing my research, you ever heard of the Quincy Institute for Responsible Statecraft?
Oh yeah, I've shared some of their stuff.
Have you seen that? Have you seen the article where it was? I think the headline was something like, "Can the Koch brothers and George Soros team up to save the world?" And it's like, so it's funded by, it's what they call a transpartisan action think tank or political action tank or something, transpartisan action tank or something like that. Funded by George Soros Open Society, Charles Koch Foundation, also funded by Rockefeller Brothers Fund, Carnegie Corporation of New York, Ford Foundation as well. So it's another example of, right? I mean, I thought if it's right versus left, Koch versus Soros, right? Why has David Rockefeller got his hand in both cookie jars? Why are they both funding this same thing to stop forever wars? So that's I think that sort of lays out what we're looking at here. I mean, remember too that Scott Bessent. So I just named out all the sort of the Koch connected think tanks behind Project 2025 and Trump. And I can go on. There's more, but I don't want to carry on and on with that. People can read the article and see it. But the other end of it is Scott Bessent, Treasury Secretary, former Soros guy. So it's not, you know what I mean? Like that's not an anomaly. I mean, it might not be front and center and public eyes on it, but this stuff goes on all the time. I also stumbled on another, I wish I could remember the article in the event, but it was a Koch brothers event with all this. It was very strange kind of MLM new age. It was all about happiness. The Koch brothers are going to show you how to achieve happiness, and had the Dalai Lama there. So, by the way, I'm going to do a long piece on the Dalai Lama and some of the new age futurist stuff surrounding him. And so another time, maybe we'll talk about that. But it's just another example of like, wait, the Koch brothers, these right left categories don't fit. So, what I think we did was, I just really think that Trump was the man for the next 4 years. When I saw that, last year, it was pretty early on. People will tell you, I told them privately because if I was going to say it, it'd just sound crazy. But I mean, like when I analyze politics, I kind of reduce everything to like vectors, right? So I kind of abstract them like these things are moving in these directions, these things, right? And these things are either going to bounce or they're going to converge. Okay. And as I'm watching the way things are going, and I've been doing this long enough where I got a pretty good instinct for it. Like, high level, like when I don't compete anymore, but to the point where I could read a couple steps ahead pretty quickly. Right. You can't really articulate it because it's intuitive, but I'm like, every time they try to hit him with these, so the deep state is so powerful, but every time they hit him with one of these lawsuits, it never sticks for years and years and years. Well, what does this do? And what it does is, it makes him look like a martyr. It pushes people into his camp. I think it was, I keep wanting to say Lutnick. It's not Lutnick. Luntz, Frank Luntz, right? He's on the left saying what I'm thinking, saying we need to stop doing this because all it's doing is making him a martyr and pushing people in his arms. But guess what? They kept doing it. So I'm going like, it's obvious. Like, if you really want to win, I don't know that you'd be doing that. And in the meantime, I would watch Fox, you watch CNN, you watch Newsmax, you watch MSNBC for almost all of 2020, except for this last year. All of a sudden, instead of seeing polar opposite stories, polar opposite opinions, polar opposite facts on the left and right media, all of a sudden you start seeing CNN, MSNBC basically saying like, yeah, Biden's not doing so. They're like, basically, and I'm watching this. I'm like, he's going to win. He's going to win. And I think he's the man for the job because for several reasons. One is Middle East war. If you want to ratchet that up, it's better to go in with Republican administration, especially Trump, who's got the Prince of Peace Award and the Cyrus coin, and he's on the other end of the spectrum, the left, the Democrats. Large chunk of their base, larger than some of the far right people under Trump's base. They're not happy with Israel, but you've got you see the school protests, the Free Palestine. It's a bigger chunk of the Democrat base than the Republican base. So if you go in, if you want to ratchet that up, and you do it with a Democrat regime, right, you're not going to have the support of a large chunk of your base. That's not going to go very well, right? So you're going to want the Republican in. That's the first reason why. Second one is, I think that by doing this, by sort of throwing all these indictments and things at him, and then of course, the Pennsylvania event that basically, it only helped them. Okay, it only helped them. Let's say that. All right, all these things sort of creating a scenario where, look. Maybe we're coming full circle post 9/11, right? I mentioned the unitary executive plot, right, and all that. If you wanted to, right, sort of turn that system on the American people, using sort of the same logic I just did with the foreign policy, thinking about domestic policy, you'd want to get the patriots behind that as best as possible. How do you do that? You have this guy come out who looks like a patriot, acts like a patriot, talks like, or at least uses the rhetoric, have him look like the deep state's going after him. This time around, because they had that 4 years off where they did all that to him, they built the narrative where he's going to get away with stuff he couldn't have got away with in the first 4 years, or if he would have got consecutive terms. Because now when he goes, and they're going to use the DEI boogeyman. That's the new Muslims in the bushes thing, right? It's like, I smell some DEI over there. Get the chainsaw, right? They're going to use this as sort of the front and the deep state for Trump to dismantle whatever veneer of a rule of government, law, society, whatever civil order we had under the guise of fighting the deep state. It's the perfect cover, if you ask me. That's my reading of it. I mean, and all I can say is I held my tongue until now, especially even with the Project 2025 thing, because I'm saying, let me wait for him to do things so that I can go. If I said it then, they just go, they're going after him. Now that we see what he's doing, now look back and rethink it. And right, if he was saving the world like everybody wanted him to, I'd have kept that to myself and never said it. But now he's moving in all the directions that I saw the chessboard sort of set up for, and I have a hard time thinking about it any other way. Sorry.
I'm with you 1,000%. I'm looking back now. If hindsight 2020, reverse engineer, and my opinion now is the Trump persecution of the previous 4 years was entirely contrived, fake, by the deep state, because Trump was their deep state play. So it's kind of like they wound up that spring intentionally. It wasn't some like left-wing deep state. No, it's there's one deep state. There's no left, right wing. We have one system. There's no left, right in any country. I talk about here in Mexico. We had the elections not long ago. There were 3 parties. I didn't vote. I can vote in Mexico. I'm a Mexican citizen. I'm not voting. All 3 parties. We're under globalism now. There's no more nation states, and so no matter what party I voted for, I'm still going to get North American Union, BlackRock, medical tyranny, net zero, 15-minute cities, either of the 3 Mexican political parties. Same thing as in any other country. And so I think you nailed it. And it's masterful. I mean, these guys know what they're doing. And again, they wound up that spring of Trump, persecution, lawsuits, physical attacks, so that they could launch him into, as you said, to implement stuff like for the end game. This is like end game stuff where they're going to have to, he's going to pass through stuff which they couldn't do otherwise on their previous left-wing Democrats or even traditional Republicans. Like he was at the helm of Warp Speed, right? And so I think you nailed it. And the other part is the cognitive dissonance is strong now, the Stockholm syndrome of the MAGA crowd now. And I think part of it is they have psychologically tortured us. Yeah. In many ways tortured us, physically, financially, psychologically, and people can't handle anymore the torture. They're crying uncle. They're like, I give me Daddy Trump. I can't take this anymore. They don't have the mental or spiritual fortitude to sort of like see things for what they are, and then they'll call you black pilled. Right? I'm not black pilled. I'm cyanide pilled. Thank you, legal man. I always defer to him. He coined that phrase. And as you said, I think I see things similar as you when you talk about vectors, where we can't get emotional. You got to come in almost cynically, looking at this stuff with cold calculation. Remove your emotions. Remove all of the rainbows and unicorns and partisan stuff. And look at the program, as you mentioned. I call it the program, right? What they're trying to push through. For me, it's often the algorithm ghetto, right? These the globalist programs. And when you look at that, you follow that stuff, as you said, that stuff is just marching forward. Whether it's Trump or Kamala or Biden, it doesn't matter. The core program just advances. It does not stop. No.
Yeah, I mean, to your point, I'm halfway sympathetic to you, even if the people told me to get the F way out of the country and through all the cuss words. And it's funny because it's really not funny. It's actually kind of sad because, dude, I got way more heat writing this than I ever did saying all the things I said about COVID and lockdowns. Right. The left is so, and look, we saw a lot of crazy stuff out of the left over the last, but I never got it from them like that. And to your point, I'm kind of sympathetic to I guess we'll call the right at this point, because like you said, I think they intentionally drove people so crazy with the over the top woke stuff, not including the lockdowns and the inflation, the war. I mean, we're just under constant sort of psychological stress. But the woke stuff, like we would watch, I like to watch broadcast news. You get a different sense of the narrative that they want, then you'd get, you can piece it together if you're in the alt media, but it's really, if you watch it throughout the day, because they got like one or two stories that every show repeats. Sometimes it's interesting to see how left and right, they'll have a different spin on it. Right. But like we would watch Fox and Newsmax and stuff. And they couldn't get through an episode where they didn't have a segment with trans stuff. Right. And it was like, look, I understand, okay, this is a problem. You want us to be aware of it. But like they'll put on loop the picture, like they had to drag an image from the drag show. So, okay, maybe you want to show me a part of that just so I believe that it's not that crazy, right? Or that you're not making stuff up. You don't have to put it on loop. If you're putting it on loop, it's like, isn't this bad? Look at it. Look at it some more. Isn't it bad? It's terrible. Look at it again. It's like you're intentionally like trying to stoke people's emotions. So I understand why I understand in terms of what has been done to them that would make them react in that way. And that's also kind of, it's sad. And it's also disturbing for me as well, that a lot of these people identify as Christian. I mean, so if you can breed, the forgiveness and the grace out of Christians, and you've already got the left that's, ready for, I don't care what kind of a revolution. You could be socialist, communist, anarchist, right? The Antifa types, whatever. And now you got the right, basically, right? People claiming Christian who, right, want revenge as well. All of this basically just fuels, like you said, the machine rolling on and moving us towards technocracy. I think, what we'll see in terms of how they kind of flip the script in terms of some of this stuff is, the pay for success is is a good window into it. Because I think what they'll start to do is, we're not not totally cruel, right? Trump's not totally cruel. He's not just gonna it looks like he's cutting and cutting and cutting and cutting, but we're not gonna get rid of all the social services. It's just, you're gonna have to earn it now, right? Like it's gonna be based on, right? We'll give you some health tokens if you wear this Fitbit. We'll give you, right, some ESAs, if you do this pay for success workforce training. We'll give you name it, right? And all of this is sort of going to be, they'll call it based, right? Because, it's teaching people to pick themselves up by their bootstraps while also, right, maintaining some kind of a social safety net. But, that's kind of the way I see things moving.
Yeah, and I'd agree with you. And the stuff you mentioned, like the transgender stuff, a lot of these like Islamic stabbings and things. And don't get me wrong, right? That's all bad stuff. The transgender, these, migrants and stabbings and things, but it's kind of, as you said, it's almost contrived to a point where they're just putting that in your face. And I'm like, and I don't comment on that stuff as much because I feel like the program, but the program, the walls are closing in, the algorithm ghetto and things like that. It's almost like those things are distractions that they're like having you look again. Don't get me wrong; it's not good stuff. I've told the story. I've gone to the Walmart here in Mexico, and they got like LGBT flag Kleenex boxes that my kids looking at and picking up, and I'm like, step back. But again, I think that's kind of is to get us riled up and not looking at the globalist, totalitarian program that they're installing, the technocracy. And just what you said, don't get me started on Christian nationalism. And, a lot of these folks call themselves conservatives. And I often want to make the point that you're not, people think that they're, if they're conservative, many will say they're Christian. You're not Christian. Given the way, you say that they behave with cursing, when you're cursing systematically, being hateful, getting angry, you're acting in the flesh, especially with Christian nationalism talks about basically creating a theocracy. And I'm like, there was a great pastor, I shared this last week, Paul David Tripp, who's quoting from the New Testament, when Pontius Pilate and Jesus, and he's saying, our kingdom is not of this world. We're not here to convert people by force. It's like you preach the gospel. If they, repent and follow you, they do it of their own will peacefully. But there's this now MAGA thing with the conservatives where they're reacting with anger and in the flesh, and it's like, no. And just, I guess further, I just wanted to comment what you're just to add on was, I feel like there's I call it the security state alternative media. So now all over the place, you're seeing alternative media, the security state. There's certain podcasts, certain guests that are coming on, and it's clear, you can smell them from a mile away that it's a security state. Some of the people that have been on my podcast, some podcasters that have asked me to come on their podcast, and I don't even respond. I'm not going on your podcast because I can see you're a security state operation. And even in my Telegram, the channel's Telegram account or X, maybe some of them are listening now. It's like, I know these accounts, you can see them where they've got patriots with guns and they're talking about Trump. And I'm like, you're part of some security state operation. You're not just some organic listener to Geopolitics and Empire. And you're mostly posting these comments in our chat to continue this narrative, I think, which you just described. And it's dangerous because they also want to associate you with these patriots, which, on a dime, they can make them look like they're crazy. It's almost like an entrapment, right? These are these extremist militia patriot types that carry out, they can go down that route as well. Or they've got the pro-Nazi, anti-Semitical ones, or they got the Russian agent, accounts. And I'm like, I'm not playing any of your games. Leave me alone. We need better psyops, John. Really, it's like, seriously, I demand better psyops. Any thoughts on that? I did want to ask you just on the Kindle thing. Any further?
Well, I guess I would just know. Have you heard about the woman that he appointed for his, what is it,
Paula?
The task force? Yeah, Paula White on the task force for this. How you like that for Christian nationalism? Even some of those people got to look at that and go what is this? If you know anything about her back,
no, for me, that's heresy. She's a heretic. She's, first of all, from a biblical worldview, she's a woman, not supposed to be doing what she's doing. And number two, that's not really, that's not Christianity. That's heresy. The things that she does and teaches.
Here's another one, dude. So the other day, is it on Fox or one of these? Here, by the way, so people that don't know, Trump was one of the first people he wanted to put transsexuals in his beauty pageants back in the day. Okay. Yeah, you can look it up. Yeah. Okay. Roy, look, and as Christians, right, we have a Christian morality, but as a person that lives in civil society, I kind of have more of a libertarian approach to if you're doing stuff that's not a Christian, as long as it's not with kids and you're doing that, I don't, we can be friends, you know what I mean? We don't need to beef, right? But his mentor, Roy Cohn, right? Open homosexual, right? The guy, he is the first president to ever win being pro-gay marriage. Right, he platformed on that. Obama did not. Obama said the opposite. Right? He changed when he got in. Okay, Trump was in his first administration. He was the first person to bring in an openly homosexual member on his. I don't know if it was technically his cabinet or just high level executive staff. That's Rick Grinnell. Rick Grinnell has a high level position now. Is he an ambassador? I can't remember. But they had him on Fox couple days ago, and it was some segment on how I guess they want to do a nativity scene, I think in New York. And this is the guy they picked to be like the spokesman for it. I mean, I'm sorry, like if you want to like have a big tent and have, him on the team, fine, but you got to have him and Paul White are the people that are like your spokespeople. And he even told the joke about Jesus and Mary switching genders in the and it wasn't like he was somehow trying to direct the joke towards this is what the left would try to do. But the fact that it came out of his mouth while you know what I mean? Like, yeah, I'm sure you and I would be offended by that, right? I mean, I am, but I'm sure you would be as well. So I'm saying that, right, for all you Christian nationalists out there, if you're still on board the Trump train, I think the only thing that's motivating you is unchristian vengeance.
Yeah. It's just, yeah. I guess just one more thing I wanted to bring up. It's a side note, but I think it's related because, considering education and you're an author, this Amazon and the ed tech space, the Amazon Kindle thing, which just dropped this week, where they've just said that if you buy ebooks now on Kindle, they're effectively licenses. So you don't own the book. You're just licensing. You're paying for access to the material on Amazon services, and you no longer have access as of today, I think, to the file. Previously, you could download the file to your devices. You could potentially strip the digital rights management from it, but you could have the file. Even if you were banned from Amazon and from Kindle, you could have the file that you paid for, ownership of the book. You don't have access to that anymore, and so you could. If you've spent thousands of dollars on ebooks, you could get banned from Amazon and lose access to your books. A year ago, I got threatened by Amazon that they would ban me because I left a book review that they didn't like on one of the books I purchased. J. Michael Waller, Big Intel, former intelligence guy speaking out against the deep state, and I left a review of his book, like total, average review, and Amazon sent me a mail saying, we're not posting the review. If you do this again, it's hate speech, blah, 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 blah. We'll ban you. Like, so just your thoughts on like this Amazon, it's a general trend now of what's happening with Amazon Kindle and elsewhere.
Yeah, I mean, I think it ties in with the larger kind of, I think what we're moving into with this administration, which is kind of the tokenized social credit economy, right? Where your access not just to subscription-based services and products, but also like physical products, et cetera, is going to be based on your social credit algorithms, et cetera. One way that kind of, the vector is kind of converging in education. One the next piece I'm going to work on, I'm working on it already, but should hopefully comes out relatively soon. One of the guys that is an author of the Project 2025 education chapter, his name is Jonathan Butcher. He's a heritage guy. And he wrote a piece promoting the use of fintech to issue the education savings accounts. And one of the ideas was that, we need to make it efficient, but we also need to make sure that we prevent fraud. So now think about all the waste, fraud, and abuse with the Doge cuts, right? So this will fit into that narrative, right? But what they say is they're looking to a class wallet, benefit wallet, which are not blockchain, but some of these, like including class wallet, they are looking into a blockchain platform, right? And so you'll get this ESA account, or maybe tokens if they move into the world of blockchain. Those are programmed only for these particular vendors, only for this month, or only for this semester, right? And so you have to pay for that in that way. And then, right, those tokens are trackable and traceable. So all of this can be sort of converted in terms of like how effective those purchases were in terms of your outcomes. Did they help you meet the pay for success contract, right? In other words, it'll help streamline the predictive analytics. And I think that that's part of a larger move in terms of, Trump has said he wants to be the crypto center of the world, the AI center of the world. And some of the provisions in here for when they were talking about the ESAs, using the fintech, it was like, yeah, we can plug in artificial intelligence to data exactly what I just said to see like which products are the best, and then we can, we can push that vendor to the front. Maybe we can kick this vendor out, right? And so I think that as they do the Doge cuts, I think they'll probably. I mean, I'm seeing the writing on the wall for fintech, blockchain, tokenized economy, and education. I could see them pushing for that in just for government payments, right? So, now we can track the accounting because it's on the blockchain, et cetera. And who's behind him? PayPal Mafia, right? Both Elon Musk and Peter Thiel, right? They are sort of the original sort of pioneers in all things fintech. And Musk wants his X platform to be like the one platform, the one app to rule everything, including a payment, right, service, right? So, I think what you're talking about with the Amazon and the Kindle is just one sort of aspect of sort of the walls closing in on the sort of digital social credit tokenized subscription based economy.
Our digital concentration camp ghetto. It's literally what it is. And all the people that I talked to, the smart people, did these recent interviews with Mexicans in Spanish, and they all virtually agree. Like, this is the number one thing to be talking about. It's like the biggest threat for all of us, because you can't make a living. Like, you literally won't be able to make a living, buy food, have access to food, to drive your car, to travel. We were talking before we hit the record button, these electronic travel authorizations now that are being activated in many countries, and I go back to my interview of 2021 with Todd Miller, a leftist who predicted this. He said they're building out a scaffolding country by country of these digital entry-exit systems, which he calls border industrial complex. And now we're seeing this come alive. And so absolute insanity. Many great insights. We covered a lot. John, any other themes or final thoughts? And then let us know where we can find you, your books and projects and stuff.
Yeah, no, I think we covered it. It's always great talking with you, brother. You can catch me at schoolworldorder.info. That's got all the links. Dallas Professor on Twitter, X, whatever you want to call it. Trying Day is where you can get the book, tryingday.com. Also at Amazon, the book is schoolworldorder.info.
All right, get John's book. Unfortunately, I've got it on Kindle. I've downloaded, though, all of my Kindle stuff. Going forward, I'm buying just physical books. Follow John on X and the website. Links are in the description. Thank you, as always, John.